It is March 13th, 1962. A classified memo moves through the Pentagon with a top-secret stamp on every page. The man who wrote it is General Lyman Lemnitzer, chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, the highest-ranking military officer in the United States. He has spent weeks refining it. His staff have reviewed it. The other members of the Joint Chiefs have signed off on it. It is now on its way to Secretary of Defense Robert McNamara. The memo has a name. It will not be seen by the American public for 35 years. What it contains will not be believed even then. The memo proposes that the United States military staged terrorist attacks on American citizens. Real attacks, bombings, shootings. A passenger plane shot out of the sky. People killed on American streets by American operatives in American cities dressed as Cuban agents. The purpose is to manufacture public outrage sufficient to justify a US invasion of Cuba. The document is detailed, methodical, and calm. The word murder does not appear anywhere in its pages. Neither does the word wrong. It is 1962, and Cuba is the most dangerous word in American foreign policy. Fidel Castro has been in power for 3 years. He has nationalized American businesses, expelled American diplomats, and aligned himself with the Soviet Union 90 miles from the Florida coast. The Bay of Pigs invasion, launched by the CIA in April 1961, has just failed catastrophically. Kennedy is humiliated, the Joint Chiefs are furious, and inside the Pentagon, a question is being asked that has no good answer. How do you start a war that the public does not want? The answer the Joint Chiefs arrive at is 40 pages long. It is titled, in the language of the Pentagon, Justification for US Military Intervention in Cuba. It is dated March 13, 1962. It is signed by General Lemnitzer. It is not a rough draft. It is not an early brainstorm. It is a finished plan, reviewed by every member of the Joint Chiefs of Staff of the United States military, signed and submitted to the Secretary of Defense for presidential approval. And what it proposes is the deliberate killing of American citizens by their own government. The plan is divided into phases. In the early phase, the memo proposes a campaign of harassment, including the staged destruction of American property at Guantanamo Bay, designed to look like Cuban aggression. These are calculated to build international sympathy and domestic anger. The memo is precise about what sustained public outrage requires. It requires casualties, real ones, and the Joint Chiefs have thought carefully, in writing, about exactly how to produce them. One proposal describes the sinking of a US Navy vessel in Cuban waters to produce American military casualties. The memo describes this in the language of public relations, not military ethics. It notes the sinking would, in its own words, cause a helpful wave of indignation. Another proposal outlines a series of bombings in Miami and Washington, D.C., carried out by operatives posing as Cuban agents. The memo accounts for the possibility of civilian deaths. It does not propose preventing them. It proposes managing the publicity around them. The most detailed proposal in the memo involves a civilian passenger aircraft. The plan describes loading a plane with American college students traveling under false names, substituting it mid-flight with a remote-controlled drone, and having the drone shot down over Cuba. A fabricated passenger list would be released to the press. A fake Cuban attack on a real American civilian flight with invented victims announced to the world before anyone could ask whether the bodies existed. The proposal is written in the same measured bureaucratic tone as everything else in the document. There is no indication that anyone who reviewed it objected. The memo arrives on McNamara's desk on March 13, 1962. McNamara reads it. He takes it to President Kennedy. Kennedy reads it. The full contents of the meeting that follows are not in the public record. What is documented is what comes immediately after. Kennedy rejects the plan entirely. He tells Lemnitzer that under no foreseeable circumstances will the United States military be authorized to stage attacks on American citizens. The meeting ends. Lemnitzer leaves the White House, and the memo is classified top secret and filed. For the next 35 years, it does not move, but something else does. The proposals in the memo are not abstract. They have specific addresses: Miami, Washington, D.C., the Florida Straits. The plan for the Miami bombings describes targeting areas with Cuban exile populations to maximize the plausibility of a Cuban attack. The people who live in those neighborhoods are not mentioned by name in the memo. They are described in terms of their operational utility. Their deaths are referred to as casualties, which in the language of the Pentagon means one specific thing: anticipated, acceptable, and planned for. There are no named victims of Operation Northwoods because the plan was stopped before it was carried out, but there are named people who were in the room when it was designed. Colonel Edward Lansdale, one of the Pentagon's most experienced covert operations planners, is involved in the broader planning for Cuban operations throughout this period. His name appears in related documents from the same file. He is aware of what is being proposed. He raises no recorded objection. He retires from the military in 1963 with a distinguished service record and a citation for exceptional performance. Kennedy rejects the memo. McNamara rejects the memo. The operation is never carried out, but the memo does not disappear. It is classified top secret and filed with the records of the Department of Defense. For the next 35 years, it sits there, untouched, unseen by anyone outside the government. The mechanism of its concealment is not dramatic. There is no shredding, no burning, no midnight disposal of evidence. It is simply marked classified and put away. The most effective cover-ups do not require destruction. They require patience. And for 35 years, the patience holds. In October 1962, 6 months after rejecting the Northwoods memo, President Kennedy removes General Lemnitzer as chairman of the Joint Chiefs. The official reason given is routine rotation of command. Kennedy appoints General Maxwell Taylor to replace him. Lemnitzer is reassigned as Supreme Allied Commander Europe, one of the most prestigious postings in NATO. He is not investigated. He is not asked in any public forum to account for what he proposed. He is moved sideways, given a title that sounds like a promotion, and protected by the institution that produced him. The memo goes with him into the filing system, and the filing system closes around it. The Northwoods memo survives classified through the Kennedy administration, the Johnson administration, the Nixon administration, the Ford administration, the Carter administration, and the Reagan administration. It survives Vietnam. It survives Watergate. It survives the Church Committee hearings of 1975, which exposed the CIA's assassination plots and domestic surveillance programs, and which come closer than anything before to pulling the thread that would have found it. The committee does not find it. The memo survives because it is filed in exactly the right place to be forgotten. And then, in 1997, Congress passes a law about something else entirely. The Assassination Records Review Board is established to force the declassification of documents related to the murder of President Kennedy. Its mandate is total. Release everything connected to the events of November 1963. In 1997, working through millions of pages of government records, the board's researchers reach a file connected to Cuban operations planning in 1962. Inside it is the Northwoods memo. It is declassified without announcement, without press conference, without any official acknowledgement of what it contains. It is transferred to the National Archives. Declassified, stamped across the cover. It sits there for 4 years before a journalist reads it carefully enough to understand what he is holding. In 2001, journalist James Bamford publishes Body of Secrets, a history of the National Security Agency. Researching Cuban operations from the early 1960s, Bamford locates the Northwoods memo in the National Archives. He reads it. He publishes its contents in full. ABC News covers it. For approximately 1 week, the United States government's 1962 plan to bomb its own cities and kill its own citizens is front-page news. Congressional representatives call it shocking. Government spokespeople note the plan was rejected and never implemented. No investigation is opened, no hearing is convened, and then the news cycle moves on, and the memo goes back to being a document that everyone can read and almost no one discusses. General Lyman Lemnitzer retires from his NATO command in 1969. He receives the Distinguished Service Medal. He receives the Legion of Merit. He receives military decorations from 11 foreign governments. He is buried at Arlington National Cemetery with full military honors in 1988 at the age of 88. His official biography describes him as one of the most distinguished officers of the 20th century. The 40-page proposal to bomb American cities, sink American ships, and shoot down a civilian passenger aircraft filled with fake passengers is not mentioned in his obituary. It is not mentioned at his funeral. It does not appear in his official military record. Robert McNamara, the man who received the Northwoods memo and carried it to Kennedy, goes on to serve as Secretary of Defense through the entirety of the Vietnam War, overseeing the deaths of 58,000 American soldiers in a conflict that begins, in part, with the Gulf of Tonkin incident, a naval confrontation later found by the Senate Foreign Relations Committee to have been misrepresented to Congress to justify military escalation. McNamara lives until 2009. In his 1995 memoir, in retrospect, he calls Vietnam a mistake. He does not discuss Operation Northwoods. He never addresses it publicly in any forum. His memoir runs to 414 pages. The Northwoods memo is real. It is at the National Archives. It carries the signatures of the Joint Chiefs of Staff of the United States military. It proposes in specific operational detail the killing of American civilians as a political instrument. It was rejected. It was never carried out. Both of those facts are true and they matter. But here is the question the memo cannot answer and that no declassified document has since addressed. It was rejected in 1962. The Joint Chiefs submitted it anyway, which means that somewhere in the Pentagon that year, the men who ran the American military calculated that a plan to murder American citizens had a realistic chance of being approved by the President of the United States. What were they basing that on? This file is now unsealed. The vault has more. Subscribe and you'll be there when the next one opens.